Hello and welcome. I'm Mehran Khalili and I'm your host for tonight. It's great to be here in Brussels with you all. We're here because something in Europe is broken in ways that are making life poorer, harder, more uncertain and more dangerous for millions of people. Let me give you a quick tour of some of what's broken with Europe. Of course, I have to start with Europe's role in what happened in Gaza. It may be out of the headlines now, but we haven't forgotten. Europe armed, funded, and shielded Israel as it carried out a genocide. Nearly 50,000 people were killed, mostly women and children, though the actual number is probably much higher. And you've all seen the videos. The destruction of Gaza is beyond words. The UN says that clearing the rubble will take at least 15 years. And yes, the ceasefire is holding for now. But if the bombs start dropping again, we already know where Europe will stand, right behind Israel, just like before. But what's broken in Europe goes way beyond its role in the Gaza genocide. Let's look closer to home, where European countries are pouring billions of euros into Ukraine, promising to fund its war with Russia for as long as it takes, while refusing to push for peace and flirting with World War III. And I should add also that opposing endless war doesn't mean siding with Putin or Russia. Just as standing against genocide doesn't mean supporting Hamas. So back to Europe. And it gets worse. Europe, as we've seen over the last few days, all these meetings that are happening right here, this frenzy of political activity, is openly militarizing. Its leaders are calling for a war economy. We're back to coalitions of the willing and boots on the ground. The EU, a peace project, is now aiming to mobilize up to 800 billion euros for weapons, tanks, and defense, without real debate, without real consent. But at the same time, everything else is getting cut. Schools, hospitals, environmental protection, it's all too expensive to invest in. Europe's economy is stagnating, and life is becoming really, really tough. Wages are flat. Industries are collapsing. Whole regions are falling into decay. 40 million of our fellow Europeans can't afford to heat their homes. Younger generations here will be poorer than their parents for the first time in modern history. And meanwhile, China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty, admittedly at enormous social and environmental cost. But Europe is moving in the opposite direction. Inequality is growing. The richest 10% of Europeans own 2/3 of the continent's wealth. European cities are being hollowed out by corporate landlords and Airbnb, while home ownership has become a fantasy for millions. And through all of this, Europe just follows Washington's lead on trade, on war, on military spending. It pretends to be independent, but it has no vision of its own. And now that the US has shifted its focus elsewhere, Europe feels more impotent, more irrelevant than ever. And what does an impotent and irrelevant establishment do? It cracks down on dissent. Say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free in public in some parts of Europe, and you can be arrested, fined, or even imprisoned. Call Gaza a genocide, and you could lose your job, as you'll hear tonight from one of our speakers, because that's exactly what happened to her. And how could we fail to notice that the EU, under the pretext of protecting us from hate speech and disinformation, is expanding its powers over what we can and cannot say? And lastly, perhaps even more worryingly, if elections in Europe produce the wrong outcome, they can now be cancelled, as we saw in Romania a few months ago. This Europe, we believe, is failing its people, betraying its history, and silencing those who call it out. This Europe is broken. The good news is that there's a radical energy in the air. Something has shifted. More than ever, huge numbers of people are fed up with the way things are, and they want to fight back. The bad news is that the only force effectively mobilizing this anger is the hard right. They're winning. In Italy, Finland, Slovakia, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Sweden, Austria, and Germany, hard right parties are either in power or they're setting the agenda. They exploit people's justified rage over poverty, insecurity, corruption, and they place the blame on immigration. They take real problems and turn them into a false war between people who should be fighting side by side. They make Europe more hostile, more divided, more cruel. But I have to give it to them. They have a plan, as disturbing as it is, and they're executing it brilliantly. So tonight, We're asking, what's our plan? What happened to Europe? How did we get here? Where have we failed? What can we do differently to achieve a different result?